All right, troopers, this is the lecture and demo for part two of Project 8. Now, in part one, you had a chance to play around with axis, angles, and just placing things here and there and exploring a little bit of weight and trying to figure out how to make a message a little bit more fun and interesting. Well, in part two, this is where things get fun. So, you'll be using the text for part two, which is on the class website. And you'll know that it's different because it's got rain in the forecast and a few other things. A little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting content. Okay, so you're still stuck with Arial. Okay, I want you only to use one font, but you get three sizes and three weights, which means you get, a small, medium, and a large, and you get, light, medium, heavy, extra bold, black. Um, and so that means you have a small size that's got the light and the medium, the bold, and so on. You got a medium size that has the light and the medium and so on. And you have, any of the bold ones that also have, a large font that's got, light, medium, and bold, and so on. So you actually have, possibly 9 variations of type that you can work with. And that's a fair bit of variety, so you shouldn't find yourself too limited by that. Okay, so now you're going to be investigating the variability of the text hierarchy using horizontal and vertical alignment. So it can go up or it can go normal, horizontal. And so hierarchy is the concept of what's important and what's not. Okay, sometimes I call it emphasis, de-emphasis. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is emphasize words that you think are important. And there's a variety of things you can pick here. You can pick all the temperatures, you could pick the days, you could pick the rain, whatever. Point is that you're exploring how to make something more impactful by playing with hierarchy. The next part of it is investigating text organization using horizontal, vertical, and 45-degree angle alignments. You'll be experimenting with different combinations of these alignments. And then start simple, right? It's obvious that this could turn into a train wreck pretty quick if you're not careful with 3 sizes and all the weights and all the different angles. It can get pretty crazy. Okay, so starting simple is a good idea, using perhaps 2 alignments at a time, but you're still striving to maintain readability. You want to be able to make sure you still can figure it out. So it's at some point it's going to start to break down, and that's okay as experiments go, but you're still, trying to make sure that people still get the message. Again, minimum of 5 layouts. If you did 10 to 15 of each one of these, that would not be too much. And then the last part of this is using extreme letter and word spacing. This means the letters can get really spread out for any given word, or the word spacing can get spread out. So we'll talk a little bit. I'm going to give you some examples of that. You also can use 1-pixel lines, which are, rules that can draw your eye from one place to another or delineate information or so on. You can use one very large font size as a design element, and we'll see some examples of that. And that does not count as one of your 3 sizes. So you'll still get 3 if you use one size really big, and we'll see what that means. You may carefully experiment with gray, transparency, and overlap. But remember that with all of these variables, you can get into trouble and your stuff can turn into a train wreck really fast. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples of what we're talking about here. So let's see, let's go to the top of the game here. So this is an example of letter spacing, right? And you see letter spacing here and word spacing, okay? And we see scale, and this is a very large font size, which does not count as one of the weights, okay? So you can create a configuration and play around with the variables, right? Just sort of rotate it and see what happens, right? You can take the same group of information, and you can just play around with different places, different placements, and so on. Again, something really large here, or you can play around with 70%. There's a variety of ways of exploring these options. You can lightly explore shapes. Again, I want you to maintain some sense of organization. Notice that the pieces are maintaining a good amount of white space. If you start making things too big, you're going to eat up all your white space. And remember that white space is what causes your eye to move. If everything is filled up, your eye doesn't move. So keep your white space, guard it like crazy. I don't encourage these sorts of things. I mean, if you want to do one or two that has these sorts of type on a path thing, but generally speaking, I would I would caution against doing that. And some of these are going to get crazy, and that's fine. I don't mind craziness as long as I see some sense of control here and there. Okay, so playing around with putting words inside of the letter forms. Again, this is rather extreme, and it probably breaks down the concept of readability. We might not be able to go, oh, I can totally figure out what this says. But, again, I don't mind if you do this, if you do a lot. And this is just one student's work. Okay, I'm just, I didn't even group a bunch of students together. So just looking at how much he did, there's a fair amount of work going on here, right? So you can see as they progress, they actually get better, in terms of just interesting ways of playing with the different variables. He's playing around with these axes, the nice clean thin lines, kind of delineating spaces, things like punctuation, like colons, exclamation points, percentage signs. These are all can be considered like graphic elements, not just part of the text. And you can do fun things like you can make a really big 70 and then put a big percent sign behind it or something like that. Thinking about what we did like in Project 6, right? So, again, you don't have to change everything to play with the variables. You can just sort of, a couple of light changes here, So we can see that whole you can see how this is all kind of related. Just, so you don't necessarily have to rethink all of the sizing or all of the weights. You can create those different sizes and weights and line lengths and word breaks and so on, and just play with that. And that'll give you tons of variables just because you have so many options in the layout area. Okay, so and here this is kind of fun. The rain likely, kind of looking like little raindrops falling. It's kind of fun. Okay, so this is the idea that you're going to be exploring. And there's really, once we get into this, there's no limit to what you can do. And there are some featured albums on the website that you can check out for further examples. And again, it's a chance to have fun. Okay, so those are some of the things to think about, and I would say, again, try and keep a sense of organization. Don't get things too big. Concentrate on small changes, not huge, monstrous ones. Guard your white space carefully. And again, when you're working on a computer, it's easy to think that type is too small because it just sort of looks small on your computer, especially if you're on a laptop. But remember that it's not small. It actually is legible and readable even at what would appear to be small sizes. So don't resist the urge to make everything really big, because like I said, that just gets plugged up and it just starts looking really thick and confusing, and it's difficult to manage, Okay, so that's the goal of this part of the project. And typography it's really a work of passion. It's something that if you're going to be a graphic designer, you need to love typography. It's absolutely the most expressive element in all of graphic design. I'm a type fanatic, and I love it. It's just fun and it's really creative, and you can just do so many things with type that you can't do in other mediums. Okay, so get passionate, have fun, and let's see what you guys can do. Alrighty.